but there are many, many sorts of issues, and I guess the ones that I've dealt most with and seem to be very productive in terms of loosening many things up are values, about values and decision making. How do you make decisions? What's a process of making a good decision? Because we tend to judge a decision by the outcome, and that's really unfair, because we have especially in for executives, that it's just so complex. You cannot possibly control all of those variables. So you make the decision in the best way that you can based on the information that you have. So then what can you do in making that process of decision making in such a way that the decisions that you make turn out, better statistically, maybe in the long run than they used to. And in order to do that, you have to refine the information gathering that you get, and also you have to refine your own thinking so that you're not going to fall into the tricks and traps that your brain will easily set out for you, confirmation bias and all of those sorts of things. So decision making, values, and certainly personal branding, leadership, especially in teams, it's all important, and I don't, whatever the starting point is, it usually branches out after that. Dinner table, parents, myself, my sister, eating some food. When you're a kid, all food is good, right? Except for spinach. It always seems to be those sort of things that are particularly good for you when you're a kid. The things that taste the worst are the ones that are the best for you, and your parents want you to eat. But no, I have good memories of dinner time.
Was it basically just talking about the day's events or anything like that? Do you remember like any standout things, any standout meals, anything that you were like, that's one thing that I kind of flash into my head as I think back onto those times, sort of growing up?
Not really. I mean, my father was an actor. He did stage and TV and film, and my mother also acted. That was her career too, although not. My father was the breadwinner, as it were, from that point of view. So if we talk about dinners, we'd often have dinners with guests, interesting people, very interesting people, from the stage and screen, as it were. So that was always fascinating, and a lot of the time I would just listen. I would just wow. Whoa, yes.
No, that's a unique upbringing. Does anything stand out? I mean, you don't have to name any names, but any like stories that you're like, wow, that's something that I can't believe I got to experience that, as a kid.
That's funny taking me back to that. I haven't really thought about this, but you see people on TV, film, and everything, and they're always larger than life, and you always think about them that way. And when they're around the dinner table talking and laughing and saying about their life and the real things that happen to them, they're just people. They're just interesting people, and you can. Or I thought I could see when they were putting on an act and when they weren't. And sometimes they kind of flip in and out of it, and then they'd realize, oh no, I'm not acting. I don't have to impress anybody here. We're all part of the same thing. So it was really interesting, and they were very interesting people that had a lot of life experience, of course, in a wide range of things. So maybe it kind of made me think, well, this is how the world is interesting from that point of view. And there's a lot of things going on that behind the scenes, literally behind the screen, which you just don't know about.
With that sort of upbringing, I mean, I'm sure that probably obviously influenced your early years, but do you feel like it influenced you sort of on your entrepreneurial journey? And again, I'm not quite sure what age you were when you sort of first started your first explorations into entrepreneurialism. Do you think that influenced it at all, or was it something that kind of hit you later on in life that you're going to go out and do your own thing?
No, it was probably there. I mean, when I was at school, because my father was an actor, whenever there was a school production, they used to put me in the starring part. Well, only actually once, because then they discovered that really I couldn't act at all.
Yeah.
They just did it once was enough. But then after that, I guess so, because the acting profession, that kind of artistic profession, is you're as good as your last performance, really, and you've got to keep on creating. You've got to keep on generating the work. You've got to build your name. You've got to do the work, and there isn't really much of a safety net if you don't. So I think probably those were the sort of lessons that got into me without me realizing it.
Yeah.
So during the whole of my life, I only spent a couple of years actually being employed by anybody. And I very soon realized that self-employment was the only way to go, because I was the only person that would possibly put up with me as an employee, as it were.
Yeah.
So I had to be both employer and employee. Nobody else would manage it. But that works fine. I'm a very tolerant employee.
Yeah, of yourself, yes.
Of myself.
So what was your first jump into entrepreneurialism? What types of things were you doing that you said, well, I can't work for somebody else, so I'm going to go and do this? What were those types of projects or those companies?
Well, again, I mean, I'm thinking back. Entrepreneur, I'm not sure the word had been invented.
Yeah.
So, the first thing I did, I learned the guitar, classical guitar, when I was a kid, and I got quite good at it. So the first thing I did was when I went out and became a concert classical guitarist and a teacher, and composed some music and kind of started to do something around that, which was wonderful. It was great.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. It got me interested in psychology and the psychology of learning and performance. So then that took me towards writing some books on that, which took me towards giving some training, which took me towards starting a training company and coaching company of my own. So I guess there was a kind of passage there.
Yeah. And so you've written some books, and you said that you you kind of just breezed by that. Did you? When did you write those books, and was it like today? It's well known, obviously. You write a book and you kind of establish yourself in that industry. Is that the reason why you wrote those books? Then as well, or was it something that you found, you had a passion for and that you wanted to write and sort of express yourself that way?
Well, yes, and yes. I think there's multitudes of reasons for writing a book. If you write it for money, you're a fool, for a start. You've got to write it for all sorts of other things. So my first book was about basically learning and my experiences as a guitarist and a guitar teacher, and a very small niche. And I sent it. I liked it. I thought it was good. I sent it around to 35 publishers. And I got 35 letters of rejection.
Yeah.
And I thought half of them rejected it because they said it's about music, and they published psychology, so that wasn't suitable. The other half said that it was about psychology and they published music, so that wasn't suitable either. That kind of went between the two. But I thought it was good, so I self-published, which was back in 1984. Something to do. It's much easier now, of course. But then it was difficult. So I had a bedroom full of books that I would distribute, and it did okay, and it opened the door to the next book, which a publisher did take on. And I think one of the reasons they did was that I demonstrated that I could write, and actually all the other stuff as well. So I guess that was quite entrepreneurial, although I don't think I knew the word in those days.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So again, there's always a silver lining, or at least I always try to look at things, right? So that, that first book that everybody rejected, might have opened up the doors for the second book. And, obviously you got that one published. So, so what did the book, do for you in your other businesses? How did you utilize that book to be able to, sort of spring yourself forward, if you will?
Well, not so much that book, but the books that followed on well, you know, leadership and business and health and training and all sorts of stuff. Um, they do establish you, certainly. The one thing a book does, and more so back then, was to kind of put you as an authority. You know, you've written a book. Oh, you must know something about this. You must be good at this.
Yeah.
So that really helps. It was a very good way of getting credibility, and well, they were pretty good. So, you know, I was happy with that, and it did get me noticed and aware. But at the same time, I always wrote about what interested me. I wrote about what I wanted to learn about. I didn't write about what I thought I knew already. Because I think one of the important things about books and non-fiction books is that you know, you've got to do the spade work for the reader so that they don't have to. So you get all the information in and you work through it and you make it into some sort of shape, and then you can present it to the reader as, you know, this is kind of ready for you to look at and digest. And it's more interesting as well if you're writing about something that interests you and you know that you don't know about.
Yeah.
This drives you forward too. So, you know, altogether, you know, that's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. What, so you got into the coaching and you know, that industry, on, you know, business leadership, you know, those types of topics. Were you working with any specific types of companies, industries, anything like that? And if so, you know, did you have a background in any of those industries, or how did you establish yourself in whatever the niche was that you were looking to participate in?
Well, I mean, I think what probably most interesting is when myself and my wife Andrea, and who's also, we worked together in the business, we started the international coaching community. We were living in Brazil back in 2001, and this was a group of, you know, we did coaching training and consulting and things like that. And I think, well, with coaching, of course, it's interesting dynamic, because the whole thing about coaching is that you support and you challenge and you ask difficult questions in order to help your client move forward in ways that they may be stuck. And if you know a lot about the industry, then this becomes more difficult, actually. So in some ways it can be a disadvantage to know a lot about the industry in which you coach, because you have to kind of clear your mind and get into that space of not knowing and be able to ask the really basic stupid questions. You know, well, why do you do it this way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than thinking, well, of course they do it that way. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
So I like that, and I found that I just from random at the beginning, I had quite a few clients in the financial services and also in the energy industry, and that was fascinating for me to learn about as I coached. I think to be a good executive coach, you need to know business, certainly, and you need to be able to listen and understand, but you don't need to know about the actual content of the business, because that's the client's expertise. You know, they do that. So I think probably coaching is slightly different than some other industries. But the ICC grew very, very strongly and very well from the beginning.
And I'm curious how, so when you're coaching someone, like you said, you kind of have to have blinders on, or you know, wipe your thoughts. So it's best to not know an industry, which makes perfect sense. And I'm curious, you know, once you sort of established yourself in those industries, or you know, you had a number of clients that were present in that industry, did you find, and I guess my question here is like, when I know something because, I might be in the industry or what have you, I sort of say, well, that's obvious. Everybody knows that, right? So you as the coach have to be cognizant of, maybe everybody doesn't know whatever it is that you think that everybody knows, and being able to bring that up. So I'm curious if you had any tips or techniques, and this sort of goes across, pretty well anyone who's teaching anyone how to do something. I think that that's a very common feeling that a lot of people have, when you're talking to other people, that, whatever this is that's in the top of my head, everybody else knows that already. So did you have any skill sets or any techniques to be able to, I guess, get yourself over that, or put yourself in the right type of mindset to be able to, again, put those blinders on, or assume that everyone doesn't know everything that you know, and, be able to sort of offer that perspective of, offering information that maybe everyone doesn't necessarily know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just, because there's kind of two perspectives, or two points of view here, isn't there? As a coach, I'd certainly try to go without expectations. I mean, of course, I can't completely divest myself of everything I know, but I can ignore it strategically when it comes up, and not act on it, and not ask questions based on it. So I try to keep that as clear as possible, to give a space for the client to express themselves. As a coach, you're co-creating the session with the client. It's a creation between both of you, and the coach has more responsibility for the process of that, how it works, and the kind of the space that's there, and what is able to go into the space. And the client has more responsibility for the content, the actual things that they say, and what they're going to talk about, and the goals that they have, and what's important, and everything else that gets put into the process. I'm trying to think of an analogy, but I can't really, not a suitable one. But you get the idea. It goes into the process, and then it comes out either as something beautiful, or something a bit
a little mushy yet, but gets refined,
or uncooked, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe an oven is a good analogy. It's not quite right. I'll probably get that just after we put this call down. But anyway, that's how it works. So I try and stay out of the content, and sometimes I may have a story that seems to be relevant to the client, in which case I'll say so, but I'll always preface it by, well, that's interesting. Let me say something about my experience of that, and tell me if it's useful. And if it's useful, great. And if it's not useful, great. I don't care. The point is, I'm just putting something in that may, I hope, stimulate the client's thought process.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you clearly have a definition, and it's great being able to have that framework that, I'm guiding this, and the customer, the client in your situation is providing all the content. So that's a great framework. Do you have any other frameworks that you use to sort of guide that conversation? Again, how this sort of evolves, and are there different some people call them pillars, or different things that you're concentrating on at different stages of your process?
Well, I guess that, like with anything, there is a framework there. There's a scaffolding there, and if it's done well, then no one's aware of the scaffolding. But you could say, of course, that you need to be accepting and have a good relationship with the client. So you let them, they drive the session in terms of what they want to talk about. You accept that. You always keep your agreements of whatever you agree with them, and encourage them to keep their agreements with you and with others. They will always have some issue that they want to discuss. Let's call it the presenting problem, or whatever it might be. Problem simply being the difference between where you are and where you want to be. If you're not where you want to be, you have a problem. If you're in a very bad place, you have a bad problem. If there's a very big difference between where you are and where you want to be, you have a big problem as well. And of course, with coaching, it's not therapy. It's not like someone's in a very bad place and desperately wants to get out.
Yeah.
Most of the clients are doing extremely well, thank you very much, but they want to be better. They know they can be better, and they want to be better, and that's part of the process. So, you know, even if you're operating at what you think is 90%, you're operating at 90% of what you perceive to be 100%. And then you have some coaching sessions and you realize, oh, what I thought was my 100% actually isn't. There is space above that. And I thought I was operating at 90%. Actually, it looks more like 50 or 60. So there's some space to expand. And so, yeah, something that they want to solve, or something that they want to work through. Then there's what's important about that, their values. Why is that important? Why are they talking about that? There's also their ideas about that situation, which I would call mental models, in terms of how they're thinking about it, their previous experience that's already shaped their expectations of what's going to happen. And of course, coaching has a saying that it's not the problem is not the problem for the client. The problem is how the client is thinking about the problem. So if they think differently, then what they thought was a problem actually isn't, or it's a different sort of problem. Because a coach can't change reality for them. You know, they can't make their partner different. They can't change their boss. They can't change the people that their direct reports. They can't get them a new job. All they have to work with is the way that the client is thinking about those things. And then, of course, the client themselves may go about changing them in a particular way, or not, doesn't matter. So those three things are always present in a coaching session, together with the relationship, of course, the co-creation, the toing and froing. And then at the end, it's very important that the client leaves with something to do, an actual action step. Because they will go away and think about it, of course they will. But going away and thinking about it is not a task, it's not a homework, it's not an action step. I think we learn by doing stuff. And a lot of this is to do with breaking through habits of thinking. And of course, habits are things we do without thinking. And so when we have habits of thinking, they're actually thoughts that we have without reflecting on them, that seem to be the correct ones. And the only real way that you can challenge those is to actually be aware and then do something differently, find out what happens, and then that becomes feedback and help in terms of what you do next. Now, what happens may be good or bad. In that sense, doesn't really matter. But you've learned something, and you've got away from this framework of a mental model that might have been constricting.
Yeah. Is there anything that you can suggest to people? Like you mentioned before that, you know, you work with leaders that are doing quite well, but you know, maybe they have identified something in their life or something that might be missing. How like what would be a how could I identify situations or things that I would need to improve on, or that, you know, I could, you know, potentially improve on, and at the same time, like, you know, so we can create this list. What are the, like, how do I identify what some of the things are that, you know, would have the biggest impact on, you know, the items that, you know, I should be working on or should be paying attention to or identifying even? Does that make sense?
Okay, well, a couple of things there. One is the word should, because generally speaking, when people use the word should, I should do this, I shouldn't do this, what they're actually saying is that I don't want to do this, but I feel a pressure to do it or to not do it. So there's a split there. And whenever I hear the word should in the coaching session, I always make a mark of it, because it shows a conflict between something that one part of them wants to do and another part of them doesn't want to do. And when they say I should be doing it, The part that doesn't want to do it is winning. It's definitely the winning. And sometimes clients will ask coaches, I should do this, I should act better towards my boss or whatever it is. And they're not, clearly, otherwise they wouldn't be saying it that way. And they want the coach to help them to ally themselves, to add their extra weight to the should. and that really doesn't work, because first they're asking you to side with the losing side for a start, the weaker side. So with that thing, what I would always try to do is to get to a place where they either say, I want to do this, or I don't want to do this. And that's great. If you want to do it, great, we'll work on that. It's important to you. If you don't want to do it, great, we won't work on it. It's not important to you. And sometimes these shoulds, once they're kind of dug into a little bit, turn out to be just empty, really. They're just what other people want, or you thought you did. So many things we think we want, when we actually get them, it's like, oh, is that as good as it gets?
Yeah.
I thought I wanted this. I thought it would be great. Why isn't it?
Yeah.
And then other things, it's quite different. So that's one thing that came from your question. I'm trying to kind of take a number of things. The other thing is, these sort of discussions with clients can sometimes get quite abstract. And what I'm always looking for with a client is some kind of metaphor, something to tie their thinking and their work issue with something else that maybe inspires them. So, like, for example, a client I remember was talking about dealing with their team and the high performance team and all the sorts of issues around that. So that can be quite an abstract discussion about qualities of a high performance team and everything else. And he'd mentioned early on that he was a fan of the Cirque du Soleil. I don't know if you're familiar with the Cirque du Soleil.
Sure. Yeah.
Very innovative. Can't really call it circus, but
exactly.
Kind of came out of that. And so I said, well, supposing you thought about your team in the same way as a Cirque du Soleil, whereby you get these incredible athletes that are just so creative and working all together with all the support that they have, of course, behind the scenes and the music and everything else. How might that change the way you think about your team? And he kind of okay, so I'll think about that one. And then the next session was a brilliant session for him, because he'd made a lot of connections by linking back what had been quite abstract and contextually bound in his work with something much bigger and something he was very much and very passionate about. And he'd got a lot of insights actually into what to do, and I thought that worked very well. So that's the other thing that I'm always trying to do, to try to make a connection, to get to break out of the context sometimes, because that's also some a constriction of, they think work, this is work, so I've got to think like I'm at work. And sometimes the answers are not there, they're somewhere else.
Yeah, I like that you infuse other scenarios, other ways of looking at things. And it's funny when you do that. Like I've noticed over the years, if I'm, I don't have like naming something or coming up with a domain name or something like that, always sort of seems to work like this, where I'll just put it in the back of my mind, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'll see a bird or something, and then it hits me like, oh, that's the name, right? Yeah. So, by putting, that other picture, that other context in somebody's mind, or just giving them that other direction, so that they're, they might even be thinking about it, but all of a sudden it just, sort of hits them out of nowhere, like, oh, this is the answer, this is the direction, or whatever it might be. Completely. I love that you do that. I love that you again, infuse that mindset into people. I said should before. Do you have any other, like, sort of, I don't want to say warning words, but words that, sort of make you sit up and pay attention to, whatever the context is, or whatever that sentence is where those words are being used? Would you say?
Well, any of those kind of words like should or shouldn't, must, mustn't. English has a lot of those, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Um, can't is another one, of course. I can't do this. Okay, well, why not? There's
Hmm.
two questions there. What stops you, or why not? Do you want to?
Hmm.
And then there's, it may turn out that they can't, and that's okay. But they've gone into it at least, and it's not just a closed door that they haven't pushed their weight against to see if it
Yeah.
really does open if they push it. So that's no, those would be the main ones, just in terms of language, because language does point to ways of thinking and mindsets and dynamics
Yeah.
that are quite interesting, regardless of what you plug in at each end.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. And yeah, again, the analogy of, sort of having this this factory line, if you will, this assembly line of, all the inputs are going in, and then you go through the session and, it comes out, maybe it's beautiful, or maybe it's a mushy mess, still that still needs to be cooked or baked a little bit more. So love that analogy. Joseph, if people want to learn more about you, your services, your books, where would they go to learn more? Where would they go to find out more about you?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn for a connection. Also, the website is coachingthebrain.com. So easy to remember.
Hmm.
Um, I got very interested in connections with neuroscience with coaching recently. So
Interesting.
coachingthebrain.com. Sure,
Yeah.
that'll get people to me.
And what types of you mentioned the few industries before, and obviously leaders. Do you have any specific people that you are looking to try to meet, or is it pretty well anyone who's who feels like they have a block that they're trying to get past in their life or in their
Yeah,
business?
as an executive coach, I do very much enjoy coaching leaders in the energy and financial sectors. It's really fascinating. Um, but there are many sorts of issues, and I guess the ones that I've dealt most with and seem to be very productive in terms of loosening many things up are about values and decision making. How do you make decisions?
Hmm.
What's a process of making a good decision? Because we tend to judge a decision by the outcome, and that's
Hmm.
really unfair, because we have especially for executives, that it's just so complex. You
Hmm.
cannot possibly control all of those variables. So you make the decision in the best way that you can based on the information that you have. So then what can you do in making that process of decision making in such a way that the decisions that you make turn out better statistically, maybe in the long run, than they
Yeah.
used to? And in order to do that, you have to refine the information gathering that you get, and also you have to refine your own thinking so that you're not going to fall into the tricks and traps that your brain will easily set out for you, confirmation bias and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So decision making, values, and certainly personal branding, leadership, especially in teams. It's all important, and I don't, whatever the starting point is, it usually branches out after that.
Yeah. 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 No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I feel like this is something that you could keep going on and keep following. When you're trying to improve yourself, when you're trying to better yourself, there's always more questions that can be answered, and there's always more directions that you can uncover. So
Yeah.
this is a really, really interesting topic, and I can definitely see, again, diving in deep with some people. Perhaps we'll do an episode one of these days where we try to do a leadership episode where we take this down a path of exploring somebody's issue that they're trying to solve or what have you. I think that'd be really, really interesting. So
Yeah.
but yeah, no, Joseph, thank you for the time, thank you for the information, and look forward to hearing more from you guys.
Okay, well, thanks, Matt. It's been a pleasure. It's really nice to talk to you. So take care.
You too.